So I'm delighted this morning to be with Andy Bargery of Claxon Marketing. So Andy, um, who I've known for a number of years, one of the people I've known for a very, very long time, particularly in the business networking world. So I've been to a number of Andy's meets over the years, conferences, and still stayed in touch and delighted Andy normally speaks at my events in a live capacity rather than a virtual capacity. Andy, for the listeners out there who don't know you, just a short synopsis about who you are.
Sure, Brendan, and good morning. So I'm a marketeer with about 20 years experience in marketing, and I've worked for primarily agencies and represented big brands and small brands, so the likes of lastminute.com and Oracle, Google, Vodafone have all been my clients in the past. But I've worked with lots of smaller companies in the property space as well, so developers, architects, interior designers, for example. And also with my other hat, Brendan, as you know, I have an architectural practice that I run with my brother, and we do some small scale development work as well.
Sure. So Andy, massive thanks for joining myself this morning. For the listeners who are listening, you can see behind Andy the whiteboard, and it's got a number of different key parts which form the brand onion, as you call it. So do you want to just explain the brand onion?
Yeah, I can do. And Brendan, when you asked me to come on the show, you said you wanted to talk about branding. And one of the common things that people get wrong with branding is they think that a brand is just a logo or it's just a website. And that's, I guess, a key part of a brand is how you communicate it. But if we look at the theory behind branding, I'm going to stand up so I can kind of show the board. As you say, this is called the brand onion. And hopefully you can see this on the video. It's a bit washed out because I'm next to a very bright window. But the brand onion has internal elements and external elements. And the internal elements are what kind of fuels the way you are seen in the marketplace. So at the very core of your brand is your vision. What is it that you are trying to do? What's your big, hairy, audacious goal? What's the change you want to make in the world? So, for example, it could be we want to solve the housing crisis by building 1 million social houses in the UK, or we want to be known for providing the most luxurious apartments in London to compete with all those top-end developers. Whatever your vision is, it's kind of the center of what fuels your thinking.
Andy?
Then you have your values as a brand. Go ahead, Brendan, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Let's say, and I don't want to interrupt this brand onion too many times, but you said about high-end developments. Possibly right now, people are thinking, is that such a good idea? And their vision is slightly clouded. Where do they go? Is it a build-to-rent market? Is it build-to-hold market? So we'll come back to the vision part, and I won't interrupt you again.
Yeah, no, ask questions as we go, because there's no right or wrong answer there, Brendan. It's what's right for your business and your strategy. I can't tell any business owner what the right vision should be. That's their driving force. They will say, we want to be the #1 build-to-rent operator in the UK, or we want to build a £1 million under assets under management, or whatever that is. That's their vision. And that's what fuels the values. And the values are the kind of belief system that helps you to run your business. And it must link into the vision. So if you want to build a very large build-to-rent portfolio, part of your values might be that you're going to be very professional. You're going to be very caring for your tenants. You're going to make sure that they've got everything they need to want to stay in your build-to-rent development for ages. And those vision and values are the internal elements of your brand's DNA. When we look at the external elements, there's your personality. How do you want to communicate? How do you want to be seen? If you're a build-to-rent operator, you probably want to be seen as someone quite trustworthy, or you want to be seen as someone that's putting together high-quality apartments that looks after their tenants. So your personality probably isn't going to be cheeky or too provocative. It's going to be much more conservative, much more tied into what tenants are looking for, which is security, I would guess. And then your positioning is the final piece of the onion. Where do you sit in the market compared to your competition? Are you going to be top end or are you going to be low end? And a good tool to use for this, hopefully you'll be able to see this, is a perceptual map. Tell me if you can see this, Brendan.
Yeah, definitely. I've got you on full screen.
Cool. So we've got a quadrant here. So if we put price on this axis and quality on this axis, and we go from low to high and low to high, Where do you want to be positioned in those quadrants? Are you high quality, low price? Are you high quality, high price? Are you high quality, low price, for example? And you can look on this map and you can start to plot your competition. So if you're a home builder, who's doing big build to rent schemes, Brendan, that you know of? And where can we put them on this chart?
Well, the most famous one would be like Grey Star. So the
So where would you
American
put Grey Star? They're high quality.
high quality, high price.
So Grey Star. So we put G Star. And then what we will do is we'll start to map out where all the competition sits on here and look for our little space in the market. You know, if there's a gap here, high price, medium quality, for example, might suggest that you can get quite a good profit margin playing in that space. But also you can have a clear positioning in the marketplace. Gives you a chance to stand out versus the competition.
But is your positioning just on price, not a niche, for example? So, for example, in Europe, there's what's called a student hotel. So it's a build to rent of sorts, but their niche is students, and they make it a hotel rather than just a HMO as such.
You can change these factors to whatever you like. I just use price and quality because they're the two easiest to understand factors. But if you wanted to choose it based on breadth of audience, high to low, for example, and that's quite a niche strategy, then there's no reason why you couldn't use that on your perceptual map. But the key part here is in your positioning, are you separate to the competition? Have you found your own space in the market? Because that's where you can provide the opportunity for your brand to stand out against the competition.
Can we just discuss the internal and external?
Yeah, absolutely. So the internal elements, the vision, the values, they're part of your internal brand DNA. That's how you plan your identity. And the external elements, that's how you communicate. That's how your brand is seen in the marketplace. Quite often you hear quotes about branding is it's not about what you tell people, it's about what they say about you. Or I think, what did Jeff Bezos say recently? Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And that's kind of fueled by your personality and your positioning at the external elements of your brand.
So Andy, how do you work? Because your brand is quite divergent. Or how many brands do you have? Do you have Andy Bargery, the property developer, Andy Bargery, the educator? Where does your brand come in? So
Great question. So for me, I have really just trying to curate two brands. One is in the marketing side of things, and the other is in the property side of things. So within marketing, I try to bring everything under Claxon. So whether it's Claxon as my consultancy or the training that I provide to marketeers and through apprenticeships and through Chartered Institute of Marketing qualifications, or it's through my agency, Community Agency Squared, that all sits under Claxon for me. And the vision, I guess, I should take the time to articulate this myself outside of my own brain, I suppose. But my vision for it within my marketing is to provide opportunities for marketing excellence, I suppose. How am I creating the ability for people to market really, really well?
So, and in terms of property, what group would it fall under? So Coronet, is that correct?
So Coronet has been our identity up until now. We're at an interesting stage actually because we've identified that we want to shift our brand and our positioning a little bit away from what we've been doing with Coronet. So Coronet is going to drop back into being a propco and will probably fall away from being prominent in our communications. And we're going to focus our attention on building out a proposition for an architectural practice, which we're calling Modern Architecture Workshop. So you'll see much more around that, and Coronet Group will be dropped back as just a propco.
So look, let's just
Let me take a seat.
Yeah, brilliant. It's the first time I've ever seen someone use a whiteboard on Zoom, so it's interesting. It's given me ideas. I'm thinking. I have to admit, we all knew what we were going to experience, but you're at a slight advantage, Andy, possibly because you teach on a regular basis, and maybe you've done remote teaching for a while, or maybe it's brand new.
No, it's brand new, to be honest. I ran my first workshop for a class of about 12 people about 2 weeks ago. And that's when I realized I needed the whiteboard. So thankfully, that was tucked away in my garage. So I just picked it out and put it up on the wall. So we're all good.
Yeah, so the whiteboard becoming really, really useful. It's interesting how people implementing. So look, let's dig deeper in Claxon. So key part of Claxon is your podcast as well.
Yeah.
So um, I think you're on about episode 40 right now. I know you've got some episodes to launch. And what really impressed me was you had a gentleman who was born in France, or he's got a very strong French accent. He does say he lived in the UK for a while as well,
He
but definitely
does.
a French accent. Is it Emmanuel Prost?
Dr. Emmanuel Probst, that's right, yeah.
So look, I thought, wow, when I heard that. I know you're a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, CIPR. Yeah.
CIM, marketing.
Oh, CIM, not CIPR. Sorry,
Yeah, that's right.
CIM. So look, some people may say that that's a huge advantage. You've got a huge network, but how have you extended your network to attract people like this onto a podcast? Is it the fact that podcast is really niche, or you understand what the podcast is about? Because it's really impressive to get people from overseas in international flavor as well, not just the UK market, but people from overseas.
Yeah, I mean, there's several parts to that. I mean, I've been in marketing for about just over 20 years, so I've got quite a large network of marketeers that started out where I did at the beginning and have now developed a career, so they're quite senior and knowledgeable. So tapping into that network's been really key. But I think, podcasting is actually it's not an easy thing to do well. It takes an awful lot of time to schedule calls, to record, to produce, to market those. So I think just trying to be consistent, which I've failed at really badly, but trying to get content out there and make it available so that people can come to you. So as you mentioned there, Dr. Probst, his PR agency got in touch with me and pitched the idea of him coming onto the show to talk about his brand hacks book. So for me, having people come and pitch to me is great as well. I'm always open to the idea of people who've got something really interesting to say, some real value add. So I got pitched recently as well, back in the last year, by an agency looking after a guy who is trying to make a change to mental health and how mental health is a big issue in marketing. And so they pitched me and I brought him on the show as well. So it's great to do that. But I just think being available is important and keeping your visibility high.
So look, we've discussed briefly the podcast. Look, we could spend a whole afternoon going into your podcast, but we don't have that luxury this morning. I promised it would be a 15-minute, and I didn't know it was going to be interactive whiteboard, which I really love. So in just a couple of minutes, people have got possibly a bit more time on their hands than they expected to build their assets. And it may not be a podcast, it may be a YouTube channel, it may be developing just a bit more awareness on Facebook or LinkedIn, or using photos. Or is interesting, I've seen Evan, for example, who's done it really well, utilizing the conference handbook from the Commercial Summit, and they've published one of the articles. I also saw Mark Stokes do that as well. So the key question, and we come back to podcast in a bit more detail, maybe in another episode, but how can people utilize the time to build possibly digital assets? We would use the phraseology now people talk about.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the right approach. And I've been talking to my clients who traditionally we've done kind of lead generation marketing for. But right now, lead generation is really, really tough. And what we've forgotten over the last 3, 4, 5 years as an industry is we need to invest in brand as well. How do we build out our brand? So looking back at our vision and values, how do we communicate our personality and our positioning? What can we do to start communicating more about our brand values, in the knowledge that we're not going to get much from lead generation campaigns at the moment anyway? And I think you're right. Digital assets are really, really important, but choose ones that you have the means to deliver. So I talked a bit there about podcasting, and there's been a huge rise in the number of podcasts, but a huge rise in the number of podcasts that get to 3, 4, 5 episodes and then stop, because they realize at that point, actually, it's really hard work. It takes a lot of time, a lot of skill, and there might be easier ways of putting together assets that are accessible and affordable. So brochures, images, CGIs, webinar talks like this, for example, that don't require a lot of editing afterwards. Things like this that I think are much more accessible to most people. But map out who's your target audience? Start with your target audience. What do they care about? How can you provide stuff that they're going to care about, that's going to resonate with them? And then just produce a content calendar based on thinking through your audience and what they care about, and how that maps onto your branding, your brand DNA, your vision, your values, where you're trying to get to, the difference you're trying to make in the world.
Andy, so look, one final question, and I'm sure, well, I'll do my best to bring you back on. How have you managed to build rapport with your guests when they are with you? I was interested to hear that that was the first time you'd ever met Emmanuel, because the relationship you built with him very quickly on that podcast was really impressive. So how did you manage to create a rapport so quickly?
Oh, thank you for that compliment, Brendan. It's a big thing for me, actually. Is I find podcasting really hard. I'm naturally quite a shy person, so meeting new people is not an easy thing for me. But I try really hard to start that relationship with a guest before the show starts. So via email, we'll start some back and forth. Then on the show itself, we might start recording at 10, but we'll be online at 20 to 10, doing sound checks, having a bit of a laugh, just having a chat and relaxing into the call. But I send in advance I send joining instructions, so my guests are comfortable as to what they're going to be doing on the day and the questions I'm going to ask them. Not the list of questions, because it's very conversational. If you listen to the show, you'll realize I'm not reading off a script, but the tone and the style and the type of information I'm going to ask them for comes across in the pre-show brief, and I think that helps them to relax into the show.
So let's just dig a little bit deeper, the sub question. So the brief beforehand, how do you convey the tone in that brief?
I just described the show, and actually also, and this is really important, I ask everyone to listen to an episode or two before they come on, because then they'll understand the style of the show. Then they'll get a sense that, I'm not Jeremy Paxman, I'm not going to grill them. I'm looking to have a conversation, and we might go off piste, and we might find that, excuse me, halfway through we'll get distracted by my dog who's barking at the postman, and those kind of things relax people a little bit. And I'll try and edit most of that out of the show. But if you listen to some of the shows, you'll come across a dog barking or biting me at some point. And I think that just creates a nice, easygoing atmosphere.
So that's fascinating to me. It's one is, sometimes as speakers they want to come to your event beforehand to just see what the event's like. In some respects, it gives them, if they want to come onto your podcast, just share one of your podcasts beforehand. Look, we're going to go into a lot more detail the next time we catch up, because I promised it would be a short interview.
Okay.
How can people connect with you? Through your podcast is one particular platform. You find it on the likes of SoundCloud. I think it's on Stitcher as well.
Yeah, you can find it on iTunes. It's Through the Line is the podcast. You can also find me on Twitter at Andy Bargery, or LinkedIn. I'm everywhere. Just search my name. There's really only me, and there's one other person called Andrew Bargery who's a rally co-driver. That's not me, but everything else you'll find on Google is me.
Andy, I just want to say massive thanks today, particularly taking time out with the whiteboard as well. I love the whiteboard idea, so people can see how it works in
My
practice.
pleasure.
So massive thanks for taking time out. Thank you to the listeners, and just an open call to the listeners. If you've got an interesting story to share which you think is relevant to property investors, developers, and property professionals, then do get in contact with myself. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Brandon.